Okay, this is the PowerPoint slides for Chapter 1, the real Chapter 1. Not the one we had last week, but the Introduction to Access. I'm going to go through the slides fairly quickly, and I'll be making another video to do some demonstrations in Access where we'll learn more about these. So if I go through them quickly, that's by design. I just want to point out the highlights here of these slides. This first chapter, the main thing we're going to learn when we get into Access, I'll show you the parts of the screen and how to navigate amongst the different objects. Okay, we'll talk about all of these different objectives through the slide set. Okay, I'm going to keep going here. Why do we have a lot of database courses in your programming curriculum? Well, as you probably know, databases are, like it says here, everywhere. Pretty much every business, small, large, uses a database to store their data. Data is very valuable to a company. And most of these databases are relational databases. Objects. When we get into Access, you're going to see, and we're going to use these throughout this semester, these are the 4 most common types of objects inside of an Access database, and actually any database for that matter. But tables, queries, forms, and reports. And in particular, this course focuses on tables and queries mostly. Tables are where the data is actually stored, so we'll really be looking at tables closely. And then queries is basically a question that you have of that data once it is stored. How are you going to get that data out in a useful format? So we're going to talk about queries quite a bit. And then forms and reports, I'll also show you those. There's a chapter actually coming up on forms and reports. In a few weeks, you'll get more on those. A database then, like we said, talks about or consists of mainly tables. These tables are what store the data, and in a database you'll see anywhere from 1 to hundreds of tables in a database. The ones we'll be using mostly have 3 to 7 different tables in to keep it simple, but here's just a little graphical depiction of what a table might look like. A table is made up of fields and records. Fields are columns, and then the records are the actual data that get put into the table. So we'll be using these terms all the time. Another term for fields is columns. Another term for records is rows. Keep moving here. The navigation pane, I'll show you that in Access. These are just different parts of Access. It'll be better for me to demonstrate that than to just talk about them here on the slides. When we're looking at tables in Access, and of course, again, I'll keep saying this, but the table is where the data is. There's 2 main views of a table. We'll look at it in data sheet view, where we'll just see rows and columns of data. And then design view of a table is actually how you construct the table. You determine which fields are in this table and what type of data can be stored in those fields. So we'll look at both of these also. There's just a screen. Again, I'll show you when I get into Access in the other video. This is design view and data sheet view. I'll explain those more. Tables have what's called a primary key, and that is one of the fields or one of the columns in the table. It has a unique value that will identify a particular row or record in the table. A form is really just more of a data entry or a way to view the table's data. Query, again, like I said, that's a question, how to get the data out in a usable format. For example, you might have a customer table with all your customers' data in there, but at a certain point you might only want to look at customers who have outstanding orders, or only customers that are in a certain zip code or whatever. Those questions are considered criteria. There's a way to create queries in Access, and all all relational database systems would have queries or something similar to it. A report is a little fancier way to output data. Its main intent is to be printed, so that's why it's got the name report. When you name your database, of course, you want to name something meaningful. You do that with almost anything you create on a computer. Any file you create, no matter what it's for, you want to give it a meaningful name so that you can look at the name and kind of know what it is. And of course, store them in meaningful folders and subfolder names too. So if you were storing a database file for this class, you might call your folder Intro to Database. That's all they're talking about here. And backup is important. I did say that data is very valuable to a company. Most companies couldn't exist without their data, or they'd have a hard time functioning. So they will spend a lot of money and go through a lot of effort to make sure that it's backed up, just in case of some kind of catastrophe where they would lose their computer system or their data, lose it any manner of ways. But they want to make sure that they can recover from that. So backing up the database files is important. As a company uses its database over time, of course, it gets fragmented and whatnot. So there is a way to compact and repair the database to make it run more efficiently. Access has this. I'll show you that when I get into the demo part. These are just the steps in backing it up. I'll go through that. And they are critical. Companies will do a lot of things to make sure that they're backed up. And it's not so critical in class here to back up our database because we're not running a business. We're just in class, and we usually have a backup of our files that we can start over and stuff like that. If you're looking at database files on your computer and you see an extension .accdb, that's the extension for an Access database file. Filters, you can read through that in the text. Not super important, but you should read through them, and then in the hands-on exercises in the textbook, which you should do, you'll get some practice setting up filters. It's just a way to, like it says here, only look at data that you really want to look at. There's different types of filters that you'll be doing in those hands-on exercises. So I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. One of these last slides here talks about whether to store your data in Access or Excel. Well, some companies, when they first start out, maybe the person who is supposed to save the data would use Excel, and that would work for certain instances. A lot of times they do that because Excel is easier to understand and use. It's just usually a single worksheet that people can type data into. But it really gets, once you get lots of data, Excel becomes cumbersome. There's not a lot of good ways to get the data out of there and relate it to other pieces of data. So there's a lot of deficiencies that Excel would have once the company gets larger. So here, it's better to use Access once you're going to have multiple tables. You have a large amount of data. Maybe you need to connect to or retrieve from external databases. Grouping, sorting, these are all things that relational databases would do much better than Excel. Multiple users. Here's an acronym, DBMS, stands for Database Management System. Of course, this one says RDBMS, Relational Database Management System. Most databases are relational, so a lot of times you'll see this acronym without the R in it. But a database management system in general is a way to store your data in this relational format. Store your data in sets of tables that are related to one another, and you will be able to access that data then very efficiently. Throughout the course, we're going to start out by using other databases that other people have created. And eventually we're going to get into how to design the tables ourselves. That'll be a little bit later in the course. That whole process is called normalization, on the best way to store data. You know, how many tables you're going to have, which fields should be in which tables, and how they're related. That whole process is called normalization, which we'll get to, you know, after the first half of the semester. I said that a database has multiple tables, usually with data in it. The key to a relational database is these tables are then related somewhat. This is mainly so that you don't have duplicate data. Duplicate data is one of the worst things that you can have in a database, because if you think about it, do you want to store your customer's information in 3 or 4 different places, or just one? That's the whole idea behind a relational database, is to store the information once, then relate data together to each other that would make sense of the data without storing it multiple times. Enforcing referential integrity, we'll talk about more of this in Chapter 2. That's a very key concept, but we'll get to that in Chapter 2. All these relationships in Access are set up in what's called the relationship window. We'll look at that. Here's referential integrity, which we're going to get into a lot deeper next week, but make sure you read about it, whatever's in there in Chapter 1, referential integrity. And then once you have your database created, a lot of times you'll put in sample data just to make sure that it really works. The databases and those student data files that we have, those are just, those aren't really real data, but it simulates real business data. This is just a look at the relationship window and Access. Like I said, I'll get into that more in the demonstration. All right, so that's it. That's the highlights of this first chapter. Hello, this is the demonstration for Chapter 1, the Access Chapter 1. And I just want to show you some of the things in Access that you're going to need to know throughout the the rest of this course to do some of these things in Access that we're studying about relational databases. I'm going to open up one of the files that came with the student data files. Actually, this is kind of what they want you to do. I'm looking at page 79, and the first step there says open up a file named A01H1 Trader. So I found that here in my student data files folder that I downloaded. And if you double click on that, it opens Access up. Automatically, it knows that because of the file extension is an Access database file. And here it is. So this may be your first look at the Access database product here. I'll go over the different areas of the screen here in just a second. One thing I want to point out, because this is going to happen every time you open up a database file here at school anyway. I don't know if it'll happen at home, but you get this security warning. This comes from the Windows operating system. It's kind of a safeguard to help against possible viruses and such. But if you open up the files here, you won't have to worry about any viruses. So when you see this security warning, just click Enable Content, and it will go away, and you'll be fine, ready to go. All right. So this is Access. Like I said, I kind of call this screen here the starting point in Access. There's really, you can see on the side here, the different types of objects we have. Some tables. We have a whole bunch of queries in this particular database. And there's a lot of forms. And also some reports. Remember, those are the 4 main object types in Access. Let me go over the areas of the screen. This area up here at the top is called the ribbon. And it's really just a lot of icons to get to different functionality within Access. This is pretty common and pretty standard with all the Microsoft Office products such as Word and Excel, and they try to make them look the same. Also notice that the ribbon has different tabs. So we're at the Home tab. By clicking on different tabs, you get a different set of icons here in the ribbon. Whenever you're in Access, if you're looking for a certain icon to do something and you can't find it, it may mean that you've chosen the wrong tab or are on the wrong tab, so just remember that. Okay, I'm on the Home tab again, and that again is the ribbon. There is a little File tab over here on the left. This kind of makes it look like older versions of Access or Office products. These are the things that are in there, like opening and closing and saving a file and printing and stuff like that. Okay. This big gray area is really the work area of Access. Right now there's no objects open that we're working on, but this is where you'll see and do a lot of the work in Access. Let me talk about the left side of the screen here though. This is called the navigation pane. This is where you'll pick whatever object you want to work on. So you can see there's tables over here. And like I pointed out, all the different objects. You can also, by clicking on this double up arrow, you can collapse these different sections too. Okay, so if you just want to have the tables open, you can do that. I'll leave it like that. If your Access looks a little different than this, you might have to choose this option here under this little pull-down list where mine says All Access Objects. Yours might say something different. I'd like you to try to get it in this format because this seems to be the easiest to work out of. Make sure you choose Object Type and then All Access Objects. If you do that, you'll get it to look like mine is going to look here on the screen. And I think this is the best way to work from. The other thing you can do with the navigation pane is you can get rid of it temporarily. You can collapse it to the left or close it. It still stays there, but it gives you a bigger work area. And then you can open it whenever you want also. I'm just going to leave mine open. You can also resize it by just dragging over the right-hand bar. So I'll keep mine like this for now. Alright, so those are the three main areas of Access. You know, the ribbon area with tabs, the navigation pane, and then your work area. If you remember from the first chapter reading, which I'm sure you read, you better have, you remember that tables is the most important object in a database because that's where the data resides. We'll be focusing on tables quite a bit. Let me just open up a table. This is a typical company. You know, they have keeping track of their orders and their employees, customers, the different products that they sell or make and whatnot. But these are tables. I'll open up an easy one here, the customer table. I double click on it. And in my work area now, we see the table. This is called Data Sheet View because we're looking at the data in the table. Remember that a table is made up of rows and columns, or if you want to think of it, records and fields. Across the top you'll see the field names, and you may have to scroll over to see all the field names. And then down the left-hand side are the rows or the records in the database. In this particular case, they got 91 records in this database. You can see that down here at the bottom. We're looking at record 1 of 91. I click on the second record, it says 2. You can also use the record navigation buttons down here. Go to the third, the fourth, and so on. Or you can go previous record, and you can get to records that way. Or you can just click on them on the screen here. You can also use the up and down arrows on the keyboard. A lot of different ways to get around. I can actually edit the data here. I could add new records if I wanted to. I could delete records. But typically you don't do that in Data Sheet View. We'll learn the different ways that data is maintained as we go through the course. I just wanted to let you know this is Data Sheet View of a table. The other view, the main view of a table, is Design View. The easiest way to get to Design View is just to move up to your view icon on the upper left and just click on, it's a little protractor with a pencil that will get you to Design View. Otherwise, you can do the pull down list and choose Design View. So we're either going to be looking at datasheet view, which this is, or design view. You can forget this pivot table and pivot chart view. Those are not things that we need to be concerned with in this class. So I'm going to go into design view here. And you can see we don't see the data anymore. But this is where, when the table was first created, the person who created this table had to come in and say which fields make up this table. You have to give it a field name, which you can see here. Then you have to give it a data type. These just happen to be all text, but there are several different data types that we'll talk about as we go through the course. And the data type is just what it says. That determines what type of data that can be entered into this field. At the bottom of the datasheet view, you'll see these are called the properties of the field. We'll also talk more about them as we go through the course. Right now, that'd be a little bit too detailed to get into at this point in the semester. Okay, so you saw a table in datasheet view and in design view. Let me close this out. Whenever you're working on an object here, just go over here to this X. This will close the object you're currently working on. Usually it'll ask if you want to save any changes that you made. I know I didn't make any changes. I could click yes or no here. I'll click yes just to be safe. And now we have nothing open again. Okay. You can see we have, it looks like about 8 different tables over here. Okay. Now, why is data in different tables? Why can't you just have all the data in one table? Well, it gets back to the point that you don't want duplicate data. You want to have data in one place and then relate data together by creating these relationships between these tables. For instance, a customer places an order, right? So we would expect there to be a relationship between customers and orders. Also, on an order, there's probably several products that that person is ordering. So there's probably a relationship between orders and products. To see the relationships between these tables, a common place that we'll go to is the relationship window. This is right here in Database Tools. Here's the relationship window button. And here's what a relationship window looks like. I don't want to scare you. This looks a little intimidating maybe at this point in the semester, but we'll work our way through and understand this as we go through. But you can see each of these rectangles represents one of these tables. The line between the tables represent a relationship between the tables. Let me focus. I'm going to scroll a little bit to the right here. Talk a little bit about that order and customer relationship. You'll notice each one of these rectangles has a field at the top with a little key by it. That's called a primary key. That is a very important term in relational database. A primary key is a field that the value that is entered into that field uniquely identifies each record or row in that table. Now that's something you should memorize, and you'll get a feel for that. The definition there on page 72 is also what I just said. But think about it. Each customer gets a unique customer ID. Each employee has an employee ID. Each order has a unique order ID. So just remember that the primary key is the one field that the value uniquely identifies each record. You also notice that on this line, there's a 1, and then there's this weird, looks like an infinity symbol. This is called a one-to-many relationship. That's a very common type of relationship between tables. What that means is a single customer could place many orders. However, going the other way, each individual order is placed by a specific customer. So that's why it's called a one-to-many. A customer can have many orders. Each order relates back to one customer. Notice that there's the customer ID field in the order table. That is the common field between the two tables. That is what links these two tables together. That's the field that makes this relationship work in a relational database. This field, customer ID, in the order table is referred to as a foreign key. A foreign key is also another hugely important concept in relational databases, and we will really hit on that in the next chapter, but I just wanted to give you a preliminary definition of what it is. So that's the field, that's the common field amongst two related tables. It's also a field that you can identify foreign keys in a table by just realizing that it's a primary key of a related table. So see, it's the foreign key over here in orders. The customer ID is the primary key of customers. Okay, so enough of that for now. Like I said, we'll really hit on that in the next chapter. I'm going to close the relationship window. And I'm going to just close this now and say that the hands-on exercises in these chapters are just very critical for you to do in order for you to understand these concepts as we work through the course. The first hands-on exercise in chapter 1 here for Access is on page 79, and you can tell the reading pages are in white, and the hands-on exercise pages are kind of a cream colored or a light yellow. Usually there's 2 or 3 sections of hands-on exercises, and like I said, you should be doing them because that's how you're going to learn and prepare for the projects that you'll have to do in the course. Alright, this closes chapter 1 demonstration. Hope you made it through it. See you next time.